Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Family Couch. I am so excited to have with us on today as our guest, Melissa Dumaz, and she'll be talking about creating your own parenting village and self-care, which are two topics that, if you know anything about me, I'm a huge supporter of. So Melissa, thank you so much for being on with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So Melissa is... her and I have been kind of talking over social media for quite a while, and we've met in person, which is always rare when you meet people online, but I love it. And so before we jump into this awesome discussion, Melissa, can you let our audience know a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Sure, absolutely. So as Mercedes said, my name is Melissa Dumaz. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I have been in the mental health field for over 16 years. My experience has been a variety of experience, which has been great because it's really helped me to hone in on what it is that I'm passionate about. So I've worked in the past in mental health hospitals, rehab facilities, nonprofit organizations, schools, you name it. But predominantly right now, I work in private practice. My practice is located in Torrance, California. And in my practice, I predominantly work with women, helping them to process current or past traumas, grief and loss. And then I also work with moms. And with moms, it could be a gamut of parenting. It could be postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and even sometimes it's just support, them coming in and feeling like they just need a safe place to feel supported and to be able to share. And so I like to provide that safe place for them and support them in their journey.
I love that. And I feel like you are such a great voice in that world of talking about caring for yourself and what it means to actually take care of yourself. And so with all of your experience, I think you've probably seen what it looks like when people get burnt out and they can't care for themselves anymore.
Absolutely. Yes. I've seen it from the professional side, being a therapist from that side, and then also working with clients. And then I've also seen it from the side of also being a parent. I am a mom of 3 and it's hard work, so and being a mom of 3, you spend so much time, or just being a parent in general, you spend so much time giving to your children that you forget to give to yourself.
Yes. And I think you bring up a really interesting point there, because we tend to have a culture of that, right? We have a culture of the super mom, the super parent. Mm-hmm. And so do you come up against that? And how do you help moms, especially, kind of not get into that rhythm of, I have to do everything for everybody else?
Right. I encourage moms to define their own version of super mom, or their own version of super dad. I think that every parent is super in their own way. There are things that using myself, for example, that I do great as a mother. And there are things that my husband does great as a father, and some of those things that he's great at, I'm like, you got it, babe. I'll let you do it, And when I look at my friends, I have friends that, we like to call the Pinterest moms. They're great with crafting and creating the arts and crafts for their children. Me, not so much, so just as we look at our strengths and weaknesses as an individual, we have to know what our strengths and weaknesses are as a parent and be able to own up to that and look at those strengths, the things that you are good at, and put the label super in front of it, because that's what you're super with.
I love that so much. And I think it's something that we don't normally talk about, because we do have social media, Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook, and seeing all these parents doing these great things. And it's easy to compare yourself to them and feel less than, because you're not doing the level of activities or things like that as other parents. So how do you help parents manage that, like that idea of comparison when you're looking at other families on social media?
Right. I do a lot of reality testing, and I'll tell them, they're looking at a snippet, and I remind them that social media is the highlight reel. Social media is, when you sit down in front of the TV after the game, you're seeing all the great things or all the awe moments that happen in the game. Yeah. And you're not seeing, the janitorial staff sweeping the floor afterwards with all the trash after that. You're not seeing any of that. Mm-hmm. So I like to remind parents that, that are on social media or looking at social media, that this is just the highlight reel. And a lot of times those are curated posts, things that people have thought long and hard before they actually posted it. And so, they can do the same if they like, but they can also just look at their lives and know that what they're doing behind the scenes is important, and even more important than what they're sharing in one little square space at a time.
Yeah, yeah. And so, getting into the idea of self-care, because I think we all know, especially as clinicians, that self-care has become a word in our I feel like in our culture, not just in mental health, but in our culture.
Absolutely.
And so I think sometimes when things become buzzwords, we can ignore them or we can just think it's a fad. And so can you tell, our audience a little bit more about what actually is self-care?
So self-care is the time that you spend taking care of self. It's exactly, what the word says. It's the time that you designate to say, you know what, I'm going to invest into me. And
Mm.
self-care looks differently for everyone. And I agree, it is such a buzzword. A lot of people, and even, all of us, we throw it around like, oh, you need self-care. Oh, you need self-care. But sometimes we don't really know what that is,
Yes.
and sometimes we're doing self-care and don't realize it. And
Mm.
so sometimes it's not just about looking at or creating a list of what you need for self-care, but it's looking at what you're already doing and putting a label on it. And
Mm.
once you're able to label it, then you can say, okay, I'm going to spend some time doing this and be a little bit more cognizant about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a really healthy mindset that you just had, that sometimes you're already doing it, because I think sometimes people think self-care is going to get a mani-pedi or getting a
Right.
massage. And so
Right.
since they're not doing that, they think they're not caring for themselves.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
what do you think are some things that we might already be doing that we can start maybe reframing as, oh, I'm already doing self-care?
Right, absolutely. I think that, looking at your sleep patterns and, if you're going to bed at a decent time and waking at a decent time and getting a decent amount of sleep, that can be looked at as self-care. A lot of times we're not our best when we're not sleeping through the night, or we're not getting enough sleep. If we're getting sleep a couple hours here, a couple hours there. And I know in parenting, it can be challenging, especially when you have a newborn or young children in the house that wake in the middle of the night or come into your bedroom. So it's important to put ourselves on a sleep pattern and look at that as like, you know what, this is self-care. This is me taking care of myself. And sometimes that looks like turning the TV off, or going to bed when the kids go to bed. That doesn't always have to be the case, but some nights it takes that to
Right.
say, you know what, I'm going to go to bed when they go to bed, which can be early.
Right. And it can be hard if you've been spending your whole day taking care of them and you have work that you want to get done or other
Absolutely.
things. So to
Yeah.
convince yourself that you should go to bed when they go to bed, it's like, oh, but I could also spend those extra 5 hours doing
Right.
something.
Absolutely. And honestly, that is a constant like battle, for me, and then for other moms that I work with and moms that have young children, and especially moms that have projects that they want to work on outside of, the job that they've done all day as a mother, whether that's working on things, related to their own personal business, or working on things for work, or even doing extra things for the kids, or for your significant other. Another thing that I like to consider self-care is water intake. Water intake is extremely important, and we forget about that. So if you are a parent who drinks your water all day long, or you're an avid water drinker, then you're already taking care of yourself in just that small little thing that you're doing by staying hydrated and giving your body, what it needs. If you are not a huge avid water drinker, then looking at that as, you know what, I need to monitor that, setting a timer on your phone for every couple of hours to remind yourself to drink some water, have 8 ounces of water. So that's another little thing that people seem to look over, or they don't think about as a form of self-care.
Right, right. And so when I think about this kind of mindset shift that you're giving us, how can a parent who is kind of like, I don't know what self-care is, I don't know how to do these things for myself, I don't know how to go to bed on time, I don't know how to eat, I don't know how to actually drink
Right,
water. What can
right.
a parent begin to do to maybe take those small steps to be a little bit more mindful of their body and taking care of themselves?
So Mercedes, one of my favorite quotes, and I think the original quote, or the original person that said this quote, was Eleanor Roosevelt. I'm not sure, don't quote me on that. But one of my favorite quotes is, you cannot pour from an empty cup. So I like to start right there, because a lot of times when parents hear that, that hits them as like, whoa, you're right. Like, I love my family. I love my children. I love giving to them. But you're right. If I have nothing to give, then how can I continue to pour into them and to pour into my family? And so I like to start there. It's just kind of like an aha moment or a wake up moment. And then after we go there, then we start looking at, what are some of the things that you would like to do? Because all of us have this list of like, well, I would like to do this. I
Right.
would like to do that. And so we start there, like, this is your wish list. Let's look at your wish list and see the things that you would like to do for yourself. And I also like to remind parents that let's look at who you were before you became a parent, because you were someone before you became a parent. And once you transition to parenthood, we put so much focus on, like, I'm a mom, I'm a dad, I have to take care of the kids.
Yes.
And we forget who we were before that, and the things that we like to do, whether it was a hobby or sports activity. So I like to look at that, because starting with your interests is a great place to start to do things to take care of yourself. When you're interested in it, you're probably more likely to actually do it.
Right.
And then I also like to remind parents or to explore with them, okay, these are the things that you wish to do. Now let's take a look at that wish list and let's look at what we can realistically do. Because we all have these high hopes and dreams. And then when the rubber hits the road, it's like, okay, that's not working how I thought it would. So let's look at this wish list, and then let's put it in an actual lifestyle. What is happening in your current life that we can do with this wish list? What can we actually do, and what do we have to save for maybe when the kids are a little bit older?
Right. And I love that idea too, because I think even just starting with a list of things that you would like to do kind of gives you that space to kind of go back to and I love what you said about you had things and ideas and goals before you became a parent. So it brings you back to that, I think, sometimes.
Right.
Our society can be very demanding of parents, that once you become a parent,
absolutely.
that's it. And so you forget that you liked sports, or that you were a yoga teacher, or that you did all these, you went on hikes and things like that now that you have kids, or that you have this parenting role, you might put off to the side.
Right. Absolutely.
So one of the things that I was thinking as you were talking is this idea of mom guilt, this idea of being guilty for taking care of yourself. And how does that look when it comes up? And then how can a parent maybe manage that when they do decide, okay, I'm going to do this self-care regimen, I'm going to take care of myself, but then they start to feel bad because they're not spending as much time as they think they should with their children or with their partner or things like that?
Well, one thing that I remind parents is that you have a to-do list. We all do, whether that to-do list is get the kids up, get lunches together, make dinner, make breakfast, whatever your to-do list looks like. I ask all my clients, are you on that to-do list? And most of them will say, they'll look at me confused, like, no, and so I challenge them. I said, this is what I want you to do. I want you to start your day or start your week whenever you're creating your to-do list and put yourself first. When we put ourselves first, we get it done. When we don't put ourselves first and we keep saying, okay, I'll do it later, later usually never happens. Or when later comes, we're too tired because we've already now given all that we have to give to everyone else, and we have nothing else to pour into ourselves. So I like to remind parents to put themselves on their to-do list first, and then again, reminding them, of who they were before, and to look at mom guilt or dad guilt as just this feeling, and to ask it, is this legitimate? Am I doing something that I should not be doing as a parent? Am I harming my children? If the answers to that are no, then there's nothing to be guilty about. There is no perfect way to parent. There is no perfect parent. There's just how you do it. But in order to do it your best, you have to be at your best, and you have to take care of yourself first.
Right. And where would you say this guilt as a parent comes from? Where do you think it might come from? Because I think you're right. When you put yourself first, you get it done, but then it kind of sets the precedence for all the rest of your to-do things. So where do you think it might come from then, that we've kind of gotten to this mindset of, I have to be last, I can't put myself first?
Well, I think part of it, comes from society that, we as parents, we make a lot of sacrifices for our children, and we do. And in a lot of ways, we do put our children first. If danger or harm came our way, we would put ourselves first in that line of fire over our children. And that goes, without saying. But in order to be that person who could make that type of choice or decision, you have to be healthy first. And so you have to put yourself first in the background so that you can put yourself first in the forefront. So I think it's important for parents to know that. And I think the guilt also comes from comparison. Another one of my favorite quotes is that comparison is the thief of joy. You're not able to truly enjoy parenthood or motherhood or fatherhood when you're constantly comparing yourself to friends or family members or people you see on social media. And I like to challenge my clients to think about, everyone has a different support group. Some people are able to do these things and to not feel guilty about it because they have additional support, whether that's paying for help or having family members that can help, but not everybody has that. So you have to make do with what's in front of you, and to remind yourself that, this is my journey. This is how I'm doing my parenting, not how someone else is doing it. Wisdom is important, but we have to be able to weed through that wisdom to know what will work for us and what's not helping. If someone's providing us with parenting wisdom that's making us feel bad when we know we're great parents, then maybe that's not the wisdom that we need right now.
Yeah.
And we have to, weed through that.
Yeah. And I think that can be difficult, I think, sometimes to figure out which is which, because, and you're a clinician as well as a human yourself, when people throw stuff at you, you tend to latch on to the stuff that you already kind of were believing. So it's hard sometimes to tease out, okay, is this something I should take on, or is this something I should just let them have and know that that's the journey they're on? How do you kind of help tease that out?
Well, I think there's no harm in exploring, like, Mercedes provided this wisdom for me. Let me try it. And then you try it and you say, it's not working for me. Let me try something else. And I think there's no harm in trying it on, but then you have to know when to put it down and say, this does not work for my family. Let me try something else. And to not give up. Just because one thing didn't work doesn't mean that no things will work.
And to know that everything's unique for you and your family.
Absolutely.
Because one thing that might work for you might not work for another family. And that doesn't make you less than, I guess, as a parent, if it's not working.
Right. Absolutely. So true. And, for example, if we think about parenting, we can even talk about timeout, how some parents will use some timeouts and some parents will say that doesn't work for me, and that's okay, but then I also like to explore, when you tried it, what did it look like? Because sometimes we try things, but we don't always have the right tools to have tried them properly or to give them a fair chance. So what does that look like? And once we see, okay, this was given a fair chance, you're right, it doesn't work. Let's move on to something else and find some things that are unique to your family, to your children.
I think I like that a lot too. I like this idea that when you try things, to not give up entirely, maybe getting more support, getting more tools. I think sometimes when you're a parent and you try things, you're trying things out of desperation sometimes, and that adds another layer to how the outcome comes out versus when you're trying things just to see how it is and you're not as desperate or as stressed out when you're trying it.
Right. Absolutely. Stress plays a huge part in whether, these things that we're trying, these coping skills, are successful or not.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. And that kind of leads me into the other topic that kind of I wanted to breach with you, which is this idea of creating a village and how integral it is. And what does that look like when you're helping families create a village of support for themselves?
So, I love the African proverb, it takes a village, because it truly does. And I've always believed it and known it. I was born and raised in the South. And so I saw and felt what a village looks like, whether it was actual family members or neighbors. But now being on the other side of it as an adult, raising children, I've come to learn that a village isn't always going to be a family member or neighbor. Sometimes that village will be a teacher. Sometimes that village will be a blogger that you've connected with on social media. Sometimes that village will be another mom that's a stay-home mom that you've connected with on social media or at your mommy support group or your daddy support group. Right. I think that we have to look at village as a broader spectrum. And to realize that, we can't do it all. There's no way that we can do it all. And we need, support from friends, from family, from teachers, and all the support should absolutely come from people that we trust. And building a village, we never want to throw trust out the window, because we're putting, ourselves into, the hands of others to help us, and our children as well. And our children are precious and we always want to protect them. So we, build a village, on a foundation of trust. And then also realizing that village can be more than just your significant other or a family member. It could be a friend, it could be a teacher. And so
And I think that is such a great reframe. You did that with the self-care piece of looking at how you're already doing self-care. And I love how you're doing it again with the village, where you've got to do this broader kind of understanding that if your family isn't supportive of you for whatever reason, or if maybe your close friends aren't supportive, to not feel like you're alone, but to kind of step out and see who else. I love that you brought up, like, the online communities and the bloggers and stuff, and how that can be reframed as your village. Even if you can't physically be around people, being able to get into a Facebook group or maybe a community of other people is so helpful.
Right. Oh yeah, it's absolutely helpful. And when you are parents and you don't have family members or friends that are supportive or that aren't in the same phase of life as you, it can be tough, So sometimes we need to just check in with other parents that are on this same journey, and they can say to us like, oh yeah, my child is doing the same thing. It's normal, and then they're just kind of like, oh, okay. So, it's not me. It's not, my child. This is just a milestone. This is what children do. Sometimes we need that reality check, and we need, to be able to bounce things off of other people that we trust or that are along the same path as us.
Yeah. And do you feel, because I think this is something that I'm starting to be more aware of in my work, do you feel like culture plays a huge part in how you develop villages and what that village could look like?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that, culture is a huge piece of it. I think that, every culture has their own beliefs and their own belief system. And so taking that into account, is extremely important. And I know that, for a lot of cultures, it's important for their children to learn things that are connected to their culture. And so we want to expose our children to that and surround them with that, so that one thing that we forget, regarding children is we talk a lot to them and tell them a lot of things and how we parent them. But we forget that the biggest parenting tool that we have is the way that we live our life. And so when our children see us doing certain things, whether it's engaging in things in our culture, spending time with friends or family, connecting with, a church or a spiritual leader, they say like, okay, I see mom pray, or I see mom do these things to take care of herself, or I see dad go to work, and we can talk to them all day long about the joys of this. But when they see it, that's when the lessons are really honed in. And so bringing your culture into that is important too, so that they hear you talking about your culture, but they also see you living things throughout.
Right. And what advice do you have for families who maybe their culture doesn't really kind of support their paradigm shifts or their parenting ideas? So you're kind of contending with your culture's ideas of child raising, and you're trying to maybe do things differently than the way you were parented or the way your culture does. How do you help parents to kind of find a village outside of what their culture kind of normalizes as child rearing practices?
Right. So one thing I like to do is remind them that, that they are doing something different, and not necessarily remind them in a way that speaks negatively about their decision, but to empower them that, yes, you're doing something different. So know with that will come, transition, time to find someone that supports you. Know that with that comes there will be things that you will not be able to talk to your family about, or that you cannot ask them, because you're doing it differently. And, if you're fortunate and have a loving and supportive family, they will still love you the same regardless of, you decide making a decision to raise your children differently. But I think it's important to find someone that we connect with. And like you said, Facebook groups are extremely huge for that, So even like, let's say, for example, you are a parent that is a huge advocate for timeouts. So you can maybe even type that into Facebook, timeout parenting. You may find a group of parents, who that's what they live by. So that is extremely important. If you feel that you want to do things differently, then that's perfectly fine. At the end of the day, if you're not harming your child or harming yourself, then there's no harm in exploring other ways to parent. And as the adult who has now had a child, things that maybe your parents have done that didn't work. I know that spanking is a huge discussion in the parenting world, and some individuals who grew up feeling like, I wasn't spanked, that was borderline abuse, so I'm choosing not to spank at all. And that's okay. Finding other ways to discipline, and finding parents and friends who support you in the decision that you've made, because there's more than one way to parent, and there is no perfect way to parent.
Right. Sometimes I feel like with parenting, it's like developing a new identity. And just like when you were developing yourself as a young person, it's hard to break away from your family of origin. So when you were like going to college, I remember my first year of college learning things and coming home and people were like, where did you learn that from? And having to, reframe the things that I shared with my family, from what I learned being in another setting. And do you feel like that sometimes happens as a parent, that you kind of get away from your family of origin in the ways that you choose to develop and cultivate your family?
Right, absolutely. And knowing that you've made that choice for a reason, and remembering why you made that decision. And I had the very same experience as you, learning new things and going home to share them with other friends or family. And they're like, where'd you learn that? I never heard of that. Some were interested, some not so much,
Right.
But I would just always remember the excitement that I felt about it. And so that's important. And redefining yourself as a parent, you're right. You are redefining yourself. And I like to remind my clients that in redefining themselves, they're looking for integration and not balance. You know, we spend so much time looking for ways like, oh, I need to balance work. I need to balance what I do with the kids. I need to balance the time I spend with my significant other. And what it really is about is integration. Because when we think about balance, we think, you know, adding all of these pieces together so that they equal one whole. But the truth is, I want to give, and I want my clients to give their whole self to their children, their whole self to their spouse, their whole self to their village, their whole self to their friends, and not these broken up or fragmented pieces. And so we're looking at integration and looking at how to bring your whole self to all the parts of you.
Right. And that's such a huge kind of idea. Can you just kind of talk a little bit about what does that mean to be integrated, and kind of what does that look like when you're working with families to do that?
Well, I ask them what they feel that their roles are, you know, and a lot of times I'm a mom, I'm a dad, I'm a wife, or I'm a husband. I also work, or I'm a business owner, or have a 9-to-5, whatever that looks like. I do this at my church, or I run a group on the side where I support friends, whatever that looks like. So I ask them to look at all of those pieces and what they're bringing to that. And if they feel that they're bringing their 100% self, and if they're not, then let's look at what's stopping you from bringing your 100% self. And let's look at how to slow down and take time for yourself and refill your cup so that you will have 100% of you to pour out to all of these parts of what you're doing.
Right. And I feel like that's so integral, especially to the parenting identity, because I think a lot of times when you become a parent, you hold back different pieces of yourself because you don't want it to bleed into your child's life, or you don't want your child to learn certain things about yourself. And so can you talk a little bit about what does it mean to integrate your whole self when you're working with your children, or when you're trying to help them understand what it means to be a whole human themselves?
Well, I think that we can still be loving and genuine and caring, you know, with our children, and still provide, you know, for example, discipline, you know, and discipline will look different for every person and every child. But I also think that it's important for, you know, our children to see our personalities. You know, if we have a great sense of humor, if we like to laugh or like to make people laugh, we can bring that into our parenting. We don't have to shut that side of us off and say, well, homework is all business. We can't, you know, make it fun. And we can't make it funny and have fun with it. Yes, we can. You know, we just have to find ways to do that. You know, we can tell jokes with our children. Those jokes may look different than the jokes we tell with our friends.
Right.
But, I hope so. But we can still, you know, be our funny selves and bring our personality into that. And one thing that I like to, that's my personal belief that I share with clients, is that I believe that our children choose us. You know, they choose us to be our parents. And so if you think of that on that hard day where it's like, I didn't know what to do, this was so tough, I didn't know how to bring myself into this parenting job, you know, just remember that your child chose you, and they chose you for a reason. And that main reason is because you're perfect for the job.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that so much. And I love that idea of how you say infuse your personality into things, that you can still set limits and still be a healthy disciplinarian for your child, but you can still be yourself. If you're funny, if you're outgoing, if you're introverted, if you're this, if you like hiking, you can bring that into what you're doing with your children. And I love that refrain. I will say this. I love everything and how you reframe so much of everything that we're talking about. I feel like you're definitely on that like shame-proof parenting community kind of ideal. So I know, again, that we could kind of talk about this forever. There are so many other topics I would love to like delve into, but I definitely want our audience to learn more about how they can connect with you, and how they can maybe connect with you and learn more about your resources and your services.
Oh, absolutely. As you said earlier, my name is Melissa Dumaz, so they can always look for me in that way. My private practice is called You Help You. And so I am on all social media channels. They can find me on Facebook. They can find me on Instagram. They can find me on Twitter. I'm also in the process of writing a curriculum for a parent support group. And so if that's something that they're interested in, they can definitely reach out to me via email or contact me via phone and let me know they're interested in the group. So the group will focus on helping to support parents. It will be a 4-week group, and every week we'll have a different topic.
Nice. Nice. And so I'm really excited for you guys to actually find Melissa online. I think her online, especially her Instagram pages, are so inspirational and motivational. And so if you're someone who does like to go on social media, I think Melissa's one of the people who, if you follow, you're not going to feel these feelings of comparison and guilt. You're going to feel like, oh, someone understands. So I'm definitely encouraging you to look up Melissa and her work online and connect with her in her various formats. And if you didn't get any of that information down, don't fret. All the links to Melissa's website and her social media will be in the show notes directly accompanying this video. So Melissa, thank you so much for being a part of our Family Couch episode and sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been a pleasure. I really love the shame-proof parenting vision that you have, and I'm just happy to even be a corner of it, and to share with your audience. Thank you.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye.